Hello, wherever you are. I don't know the time that you'll be accessing this, but I trust that you are doing well and your studies are going on well. This video lecture will cover week 5 of our studies in psychology of human development and learning. Specifically, we'll be looking at socio-emotional and moral development in infancy, childhood, and adolescence. And then we'll talk about some of the emotions that children experience and how they express these emotions. Then we talk about their social interactions, how they interact with their caregivers, their peers, their playmates, etc. We'll look at Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. And then we'll look at moral development. Specifically, we look at Piaget's theory and Kohlberg's theory. And then finally, we discuss the implications for teaching. How do these theories apply in the classroom? How are we going to use them? We'll look at all this. So let's begin with socio-emotional development. In infancy, children experience emotions like the way adults also have emotions. So by the time the child is born, the child is able to what? Express early emotions. They express emotions like happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. And so usually when the child is happy, you see them smiling, laughing, clapping their hands. When they are sad or they are in pain, they cry. When they are angry or they are frightened, they shiver. Or sometimes they open their eyes wide in amazement. These are some of the early emotions that children experience. Specifically, we are going to look at some of the emotions that they experience. The first one is what we call social smile, a smile that is invoked the moment the child sees a human face. Normally, it is evident in full term about 6 weeks after the child is born. So no matter who the child sees, the child begins to what? Smile at the person. That is what we refer to as what? Social smile. Then we also have anxiety, separation anxiety. Children are also able to what? Or infants are also able to show feelings of anxiety. And this is, uneasiness, worry, or distress that a child has when a familiar caregiver or a loved one leaves or is no longer around. Usually, this starts between 9 to about 14 months. So the child's mother is gone to work, and the moment they notice that their mother or their father or whoever that is close to them is not around, they begin to cry. And it's because what? There is separation anxiety, the worry or the fear or the distress that the caregiver or the loved one is gone. Then we have stranger wariness. Stranger wariness. So the child expresses concern or they stare at what? Um, at an unfamiliar person when they see it. So usually after about age 1, the child is able to even discriminate between who is their mother or father and who is not. So whilst they are holding on to their loved ones like their mother or their father, they stare at those who are strangers, who they are not so much familiar with. That is why when you are seeing the child for the first time, or you've seen the child for some time, and then it's been long you saw the child, when you see that child again, it's like the child doesn't know you. The child is staring at you, and that is what you refer to as the stranger awareness. We also have self-awareness. Self-awareness. It gets to a point where the child realizes that he or she is an entity separate from other people. The child notices that he is a human being separate from his mother, separate from his father, separate from those who are around what his environment. In childhood or in infancy, children develop what we call attachment. Attachment is what is what referred to as what? An affectionate tie, a bond, a connection that a child or an infant forms with what? The caregiver. Remember, this caregiver can be the mother, the the father, anybody that is close and provides the basic primary needs of the child is the caregiver. So in infancy, the child forms what? A bond, a tie, a connection with the mother, and this endures even into what? Adulthood. So how do children show that they are attached to their attachment figure or their caregivers or their significant others or their loved ones? The first thing is proximity seeking. So they always want to be close to their parents. Even if the parent is doing something, they want to hold on, cling on to their dress or hold on to their trousers. They just want to be what? Close to the caregiver or their loved one. Then they also want to maintain contact. So the second point is contact maintaining. They will be touching their parents, holding on to their dresses, clinging on to their back, holding their leg, or holding their hand. So it's not only about being close to the people, they also want to touch and make contact with the caregivers. There are two, or let me say three, types of attachments that children can form in infancy. And we have the first one being secure attachment. So here, the child gains some comfort and confidence when their caregivers are present. So the child is relaxed, the child feels warm, the child feels loved because the caregiver is around at that moment. Then we have what we call insecure avoidance attachment, where the child does not have any connection with the caregiver or the primary caretaker, and so they avoid connection with their caregivers. So they don't even care if their mother is around or is not around. They are on their own. The way some children will cry when their parents leave, or they will be screaming, Mama, they want to see their parents. In people with insecure or avoidant attachment, they don't care whether their caregiver is present or absent, has returned. Nothing pushes them because the bond between them and the caregiver is not so tight. Then we have insecure, resistant, or ambivalent attachment. Insecure, resistant, or ambivalent attachment. So in these attachments, the child's anxiety and uncertainty are evident, as when the infant becomes very upset at the separation from the caregiver, such that both the infant resist to seek contact on reunion. So here, the child is connected with the mother, the child is connected with the caregiver. But once the caregiver leaves, they are so angry, they are so annoyed, they are so upset by that separation. And so, even if the caregiver returns, they do not seek to reunite, or the way when some children see their parents come back from work for a long time, they run to hug them. No, they are not interested in that because they have said that their parents are what separated from them. Then we have this organized attachment, and this is the type of attachment that is marked by what? The child does not have a consistent reaction to the departure or arrival of the caregiver. So sometimes when the caregiver leaves, they will cry. Sometimes when they leave, it's like they are not concerned. Sometimes when the caregiver comes, they are eager to reunite with the caregiver. At other times, they don't care if the caregiver returns. So you see that the connection between the child and the mother or the caregiver is inconsistent. And that is what we refer to as the disorganized attachment. Now, in childhood, how do children develop socially and emotionally? All that we have talked about is what? Infancy. So we talk about some of the early emotions the child experiences, and we talk about attachment and the types of attachment. Now, let's look at how children develop socio-emotionally in childhood. One of the ways that children do this is through play. You know that between the ages of 3 to about 11, children engage in what we call active play. They are just experimenting, exploring their environment, having fun, and learning as well. What are some of the types of play? We have pretend play. So the child is alone and the child is playing on their own. It is what we call solitary or pretend play. Usually in pretend play, the child pretends to be someone. So the child maybe will mimic a doctor, a teacher, a grandparent, but they are alone. Nobody is playing with them. Then we have social play. Now, social play, the child plays with other children. The child is not alone. So the child has what we call active playmates. Active playmates. So what are some of the types of social play? The first one we want to talk about is the rough and tumble play. The rough and tumble play. So with this kind of play, it looks as if children are fighting. They are wrestling, they are chasing each other, they are pushing each other here. But the actual intent is just for them to play, have fun, learn, explore their environment. They don't have the intent to harm each other, but on the outward, that is how it looks, and that is what we refer to as the rough and the tumble play. We have socio-dramatic play. So socio-dramatic play is actually a type of pretend play, but in this situation, the child has active playmates or other children helping the child to play. And so they act out certain roles. A typical example of this play is mama and daddy, mommy and papa. So the younger female will be the mommy, the younger male will be the papa, and then they'll play out roles. One person will act as the mother, they are cooking in the house, the father is going to work, they will come back, save the person. All that, they are dramatizing the things they see in their social settings. And that is what we refer to as social dramatic play. There are times that they will mimic their teachers, how their teachers teach them, how their teachers teach and dance in the class. They are dramatizing things they see in their social setting. Now let's look at adolescence. Adolescence. How do children develop socio-emotionally in adolescence? Now, in adolescence, they seek relationship. Adolescents seek relationship. So it is characterized by a time when children they distance themselves from their parents. Now they want to form relationships for themselves with their peers, most especially. Parent-adolescent relationships are important, but they are not always peaceful. So this is the time you see adolescents rebelling against their parents because they feel they are adults. And so it is easy for dispute, disagreement to be common because they think they are grown. You remember when we were talking about physical development in adolescence, we said that they are matured physically, but psychosocially they are not matured. And so because of the changes they see in themselves, they feel that they are mature to take certain decisions or be independent. And this is what brings the conflict or the disputes between adolescents and their parents. So actually, what parents need to do is to befriend their adolescent children and also monitor them so that they guide them to make the right choices. Because it is a time that is characterized by a lot of experimentation where they want to try new things for themselves because they feel they are adults. So if you want to use the authoritative method or authoritarian method where you don't befriend them and allow them talk to you about their struggles, then they are likely to hide a lot of things from you as their parents. So parental monitoring is an ongoing awareness of what their children are doing, where, and with whom. So if your adolescent child comes and tell you, "Ma, I'm going for an outing," you don't just let the child go. You monitor. You want to find out where. Maybe we are going for an outing, we are going for an excursion at Afajato. With whom? I'm going with the teens in my church or my class. Who? What time would you be there? What time would you come back? And you have a means of verifying all this information. And that is what we mean by what adolescent or parental monitoring. So you don't just ask them, but you verify the information as well. So in adolescence, they rely so much, as I said, on their peers to navigate what issues and changes that they have. So if an adolescent is noticing a change in their bodies, they are likely to talk to their peers, their friends, than they will talk to their parents. If they are having intellectual challenges at home, problems with learning, social changes, etc., whatever their worry is, it is easier for them to talk to their peers than their parents. So peer relationships can help adolescents cultivate either good and bad behaviors. So it depends on the kind of peers too that adolescents keep around this time. If they have bad peers, they are going to influence them negatively. But if they have good peers, they are going to influence them positively. And this is why parents should also monitor the kind of friends or the kind of peers that their adolescent children have. And so we have something we call peer pressure, where people of the same age group, they encourage certain or particular behaviors, ways of dressing and attitude. Usually, it is considered negative when peers encourage behavior that is contrary to what the societal norms or the rules of the parents. But peer pressure can also be positive. But the issue is that most of the time we see peers having negative influences on each other rather than positives. Now, it is not uncommon to find that adolescents are having romantic relationships. So a 13-year-old girl or boy will have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they even want to experiment with sex. And so research has shown that most adolescents have their first sexual debut or their first sexual encounter before age 16. Some adolescents also have strong sexual urges, but they don't have the reasoning to think about the consequences of engaging in or indulging these sexual urges, including the risk of pregnancy, the risk of STIs, and including HIV. And so that is why in adolescence, it is required that they have extensive sex education, first from the parents. In our Ghanaian culture, we say it's a taboo to talk about sex with children. But in this age, children are getting a lot of information from the internet, from the radio, from the TV, ads, music videos, YouTube. And so you'll be doing your child or your adolescent child a lot of harm by not educating them on sex and sex related issues. So first it has to start from the family. Parents have to start, and then in the school it is continued, plus other social settings, including church. In church, it's not only about preaching, but teaching adolescents about these things. Now, let's look at one of the theories under socio-emotional development, and that is Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. Now, the stages are 8, but for the purposes of this course, we will do up to adolescence, and this ends at stage 5. Now, Erickson says that everybody progresses through these stages from the time you are born, and there are age limits. Now, as you go through these stages, there is a conflict or a crisis that you have to resolve. And once you resolve the crisis very well, you will gain a basic virtue. So in stage 1, we have trust versus mistrust. These are the crises. We call them what? Psychosocial crisis. And if you are able to resolve this crisis very well, the virtue that you get is hope. The second one is autonomy versus shame. And if you're able to resolve it, you get what? Will. Usually it's between age 1.5 to 3. So you see that for each of the stages, there is psychosocial crisis, there's a basic virtue, and there's a particular age range within which this crisis occur. And so we'll take each one of them and then we'll explore. Now, the first stage is what we call the trust versus mistrust stage. So at this stage, it starts from the time that the child is born to about 18 months. And the child is uncertain about the new environment or the world in which they have found themselves. And so they depend on the look on their primary caregiver, in which case their mother, their father, their auntie, whoever it is that is giving them care for all their needs and for stability and consistency of care. So if the care that the child receives is consistent, predictable and reliable, they develop a sense of trust, and which will carry them towards other relationships, so they feel secure. For example, when the child is crying and the caregiver refuses to attend to the child will have feelings of what? Mistrust, that people out there are not willing to what? Um, be relied on, or when there is a need for help and he or she cries for help, people will not be willing to help them, and so they develop feelings of mistrust. But anytime the child cries and the caregiver reaches out to accept the child, then the child has this feeling of trust, that people are what? Reliable, and that when the child is in danger or the child is in trouble, when he reaches out and he calls out, people will what? Come out to help the child. And so the child develops what we call the basic virtue here is hope. The basic virtue is hope. So if the needs of the child are not met, the child grows up not trusting people. The child has suspicion and what? Anxieties. The second stage, which is about 1.5 years, that is 18 months to about 3 years. According to Erickson, children at this stage are focused on developing a sense of personal control over their physical skills and a sense of independence. Remember, it is at this time that the child is learning how to walk, pick up certain things for themselves. So success in this stage will result in a virtue that we call the will. The child has the will to do things for themselves. So if children in this stage are encouraged and supported, they have increased independence. So for example, the child is learning how to walk, and any time the child wants to take some independent steps, you are so scared that the child will fall down, the child will hurt themselves, and you don't allow them what? Have that sense of what? Personal control and independence, and so they will not develop that will. And so if you allow them to have that sense of independence, they become confident and secure in their own ability to navigate through the world, to do things for themselves, to solve their own problems or challenges. And that is what we refer to the stage of what? Autonomy versus shame. So the child is striving for autonomy. And so if you give the child that chance to have that independence or that autonomy, the child will develop what? A sense of will. But if the child does not develop that sense of autonomy or independence or personal control over their own activities, the child has feelings of what? Shame. Now let's look at initiative versus guilt. Initiative versus guilt. So this is about 3 years to about 5 or 6 years. Now during this stage, what children want to do is what? They want to interact and take initiative. They want to assert themselves. They want to engage more in play and other social interaction. It is a time of vigor of action and behaviors that the parents see as aggressive. Remember when we were doing physical development, I said that childhood is a period characterized by what? A lot of physical activity and aggressiveness, because they have a lot of energy. It looks as if they are hyper or they are aggressive. It's because they want to take certain initiatives to do certain things. So central to this stage is what? Play. And we talk about that under physical development, that children naturally have the edge to engage in play. And play provides children with opportunity to explore their interpersonal skills. There is a time that the child will play alone, that is having pretend play. And there's a time that the child will play with what? Playmates, active playmates. So the child will have to interact with those people. And so the interaction will involve initiating play activities. Oh, Kweku, let's do this. Oh, Ama, let's play with the doll. They are initiating what? Interpersonal skills and how to relate with people. and it will allow them to take initiative when they grow up. So when children have success in this stage, they develop what? The virtue of purpose, that they can take initiative, that I want to do it, or I want to do this, and then they are able to stand up and do that or achieve that goal. But failure to achieve these words, a virtue of purpose, then the child has what we call guilt. The guilt or the feeling that the child does not have any purpose, but the child cannot do anything for themselves. Now the next stage is what? Industry versus inferiority. Industry versus inferiority. This is from age about 5 to 12 years. The child forms more friendship with peers. So the child at this stage wants to win the approval of what? The peers or the friends by demonstrating some specific competencies that are valued by everybody around, or the society. And they begin to develop a sense of pride in their ability to accomplish what? These competencies. So Kofi was able to wear his own shirt and lace his own shoe. They also want to do it. Amma was able to bath, and Amma was able to sweep the house. They also want to sweep. And so if children are encouraged and reinforced to take initiative and demonstrate these competencies, they want to sweep, they want to cook. When you are cooking, they want to stir the soup. It's because they want to demonstrate that competency, and they want to develop a sense of pride in their ability to accomplish those competencies. If initiative is not encouraged, or if parents restrict children, the child wants to grind pepper for you. You said no, the child should not do it. The child wants to stir your soup for you. You said no, you are sweeping. The child says she wants to help you. You say no. They begin to feel inferior. They begin to think that no, they cannot do anything for themselves, or they cannot do certain competencies that are valued by the society. And so they will doubt, they have self-doubt, they will doubt their own abilities, and they cannot reach their own potential. Now, when it gets to adolescence, we get to the stage we refer to as identity versus role confusion. Identity versus role confusion. So in adolescence, it is often understood as a search for what? Consistent understanding of oneself. One of the key things that adolescents want to discover is to know who they are. Self-expression, self-concept becomes very important to them at this age. So they are constantly asking themselves, who am I? How different am I from my other peers? So a major thing that happens at this stage is that the adolescent child learns roles that he will occupy as an adult. It is at this stage that the adolescents will re-examine their own identity and try to find out what exactly can they do, or who exactly are they? How are their own abilities unique and different from other people? So Erickson suggests that two identities are involved: sexual identity and occupational identity. So sexual identity has to do with how they are attracted to different groups of people. Are they attracted to males, or they are attracted to are they attracted to opposite sexes, or they are attracted to same sex? Secondly, we have occupational identity. What can they do? What skills do they have that they know that they can fit in? So somebody will say, okay, I think I can become an engineer. I think I can become a lawyer. I think I can become an astronaut. So they want to carve an identity, a niche for themselves, sexually and occupationally. So identity achievement, it is a term that Erickson used, that it gets to a point where the adolescent child understands who he or she is as a unique individual in respect with their past experiences and their future plans. And so these include other identities, including their identity, their religious identity. Are you a Christian, Muslim? Even if you are Christian, which type of Christian? Are you Orthodox? Are you charismatic? They start gaining this identity for themselves at this stage. They also have their sexual identity. Oh, me, I'm not a homosexual, I'm a heterosexual. And I identify with myself as what? Female. In fact, most of the challenges people have with sexual identity and gender identity begins in adolescence. So usually they begin to, a male will say, I don't feel like I'm a male. I feel like I'm a female trapped in a male body. Or a female will say, I don't feel attracted to what? Boys or men, but I feel attracted to females. They also carve their political or ethnic identity. So I believe in this political party, or I belong to this ethnic group. So I subscribe to what? The cultural values of this ethnic group. And as usual, their work or their vocational identity. So I want to become a teacher. And so they push all their plans, all their purposes towards achieving these identities. Now, if the child or the adolescent is not able to attain identity achievement, they have what we call role confusion, where the adolescent does not know what they are about, or they don't care about who they are or what they seek to achieve. And it is sometimes called identity confusion. Then we also have foreclosure, where Erickson says that sometimes people form their identity prematurely. So they don't question themselves. They don't take time to look for things deep within themselves that they know they can do or they can identify with. But they just adopt the identity of their parents or what society expects of them. And without questioning it, without analyzing it, they just accept it like that for themselves, which Erickson thinks that is too early. And that is what we refer to as foreclosure. Now, let's look at moral development. All that we have talked about from the beginning up to this point has to do with socio-emotional development. So now let's do moral development. The term moral comes from the Latin word more, which means the manner or the pattern of behavior that conforms or aligns itself or is in congruence or is in agreement to the standards of a group or a society. The patterns of behavior or the attitudes, the mannerisms or the actions that are in alignment or that are in conformity with the standards of a group or a society. So when we talk about morality, simply we are referring to a sense of what is right or wrong. When we talk about morality, basically that is what it means. Is this action right or is this action wrong? Moral development does not happen all of a sudden. It is a process. Now, individuals, especially children, can adopt and internalize what is right or wrong in their society. So there are a series of steps that the child goes through, and that is why we say that it is a process. The child does not imbibe things all of a sudden. The child goes through a process to accept what society deems as right or wrong. So moral development is gradual. It is gradual. It is step by step. It occurs one process after the other, where the child gains an understanding or conceptualizes what is right and wrong. And this includes conscious religious values, social attitudes, and behaviors. So with time, the child begins to learn that this action is wrong, this action is bad. Moral development involves changes in what one's thoughts, feelings, and behavior regarding what is right or wrong. So at a point in time, somebody can believe that something is what right, but later on they can change that thought or that feeling or that behavior and conclude that what a certain behavior is wrong or a certain action is wrong. And that is why we are saying that what it involves constant change in thoughts, feelings, behavior regarding what is right or wrong. Moral development also involves interpersonal and intrapersonal dimension. When we say interpersonal, It means our views about right or wrong based on what others say, based on what others say in our environment or in our society. Then when we say intrapersonal, it is our view or our thoughts about what is right or wrong based on our own convictions or our own philosophies. You know, sometimes as we are growing, we adopt certain philosophies or certain thoughts or ideas that guide the way we behave. And usually these things also affect what our moral judgment, how we judge whether an action is right or wrong. So moral development involves 4 questions. The first one is, how do individuals think or reason about moral decisions? So Kofi was hungry, but his stepmother didn't give him food. So he went to pick soup from the pot. How do people think about this action? Do people think it is right or wrong? How do individuals actually behave in moral circumstances? So Kofi is hungry. The stepmother says you will not give Kofi food, but there's soup in the pot which contains meat. Will Kofi actually go and take the soup or the meat, or the Kofi will leave it at that? Now, how do individuals feel about moral matters? Do they feel bad? Do they feel angry? Do they feel happy about certain moral decisions? And what characterizes an individual's moral personality? As an individual, you have a consistent pattern of behavior in terms of doing what is right or wrong. So does the individual have a moral personality that is consistently doing what is right, or the person has a personality that is consistently doing what is wrong? Now, what are some of the agencies of moral development? What are some of the agencies? What are some of the institutions? An agency basically is an institution. So what are some of the institutions that help in moral development? The first one is the home, because that is where the child develops first. So the home provides the first social environment where the child goes through interaction with parents and siblings, and this shapes moral development. So at home, the child would insult the siblings and the parents beat him or her that what it is not good to insult. So the home or the parents are shaping the child's behavior as to what is right or wrong. Secondly, aside the home, the next point that the child, or the next institution that the child finds itself, is the school. So the school also is one of the educational institutions that what shapes moral development. So values are inherent what in our Ghanaian culture, are imbibed into students what in the school setting, and that is why in your university we want you to develop what a sense of right and wrong, the right dressing, the right attitude towards lecture, the right attitude towards studies. So the aim of education is to train the child to be morally sound, to judge between what is right and what is wrong, and to use that knowledge to build the nation. Secondly, we have the mass media, radio, TV, internet, newspaper, all the forms of media you can think about. They teach children acceptable cultural practices and promote understanding of certain moral issues. And that is why the content that are streamed on our TV stations are important, because you don't just put anything and show it, because children are learning from it. Most of our movies, Ghanaian movies we have, are full of insults, children disrespecting adults, and these things children watch. And one of the ways that children learn is through what modeling, learning from what they see on TV, radio. And so if you want the sense of right and wrong, then the mass media must promote what things that will teach children sound moral values. Then sometimes children also learn what morality from peers or friends. So as they grow, they enjoy the company of their friends than their parents, particularly in adolescence. And so as they are with their peers, they learn to obey rules and regulations of the group, the peer group that they belong to, and respect their colleagues. The last one is religious bodies. Ghanaians are religious people. 70% of Ghanaians are religious or are Christians per the last population census. And so the church and the mosque, we also teach what is right and wrong using what theological means and using what biblical scriptures or scriptures from the Quran to train and preach sermons during Sundays or Friday worship as to what is right for each person to do and what is wrong for each person to do. So let's look at some theories of moral development. The first one is Piaget's theory of moral development, and the next one is what? Kohlberg's theory of moral development. We'll look at them and we'll also look at their implications for education. So let us look at Piaget's theory. So Piaget proposed that children go through two stages of how they think about what morality, that is what is right and wrong. He calls one heteronomous morality and the other one he calls autonomous morality. Heteronomous morality is for younger children below the age of 7, usually between 4 to 7 years. But in children older than 10 and above, they display autonomous morality. So let's take heteronomous morality. So in this type of morality, children regard rules and duties to others as unchangeable givens. What do we mean by unchangeable givens? It means that justice is whatever the authority says is right, or morality is what the authority says is right. So since mommy said this, or since my teacher said this, it means what? It is right. And authorities' punishments are what? Justified. There's a reason why authority punishes you. So they don't rebuke or they don't discriminate authorities' punishment. So whether an action is good or bad or right or wrong is determined by the consequences of that action. So for children, if they do something and they are beaten, it means what? That action is wrong or is bad. But if they do something and they are rewarded, it means that action is right. So here it is the consequences that determine whether or not the action is right or wrong, and not the reasoning behind the action or the motives behind the action or the intentions behind the action. So the acts that are not consistent with rules are bad, as I said earlier, and those that are consistent with rules are good. So actually, children judge behavior in absolute terms. So a particular behavior is either wrong or right, or is totally wrong or totally right. You can't have any middle point. So everyone sees and judges the morality of people and the behavior in the same way they do. Children are inferior to adults because of fear, affection, and admiration. So morality easily conforms to what? Social pressures. So once your parents, your teacher, your pastor says this is right, or you do something wrong and they punish you for that action, it means that that particular action is wrong. But if you do something and you are praised for that action, it means that particular action is right. So children are constrained in morality because they have not actually achieved what? Concrete operational stage of development. You remember Piaget, the third stage is what? Concrete operation. Concrete of where the child is able to reason, but in terms of what? Concrete objects, so they can classify, they can do seriation, etc. So Piaget says that the morality of constraint, or the reason why they cannot judge the intent or the motives behind the actions that people take as a result of two factors. The first one is that parental control is coercive. So whatever the parents say, they actually push or they force on the children. And it is unilateral. So it leads children not to question the actions of their parents and also not to question the respect for what adults and their rules. So since what I don't want to question my parents, I don't want to sound like somebody who is disrespectful, then what they just accept whatever their parents say is right or wrong without questioning the motives or the intent behind those actions. The second reason behind the morality of constraint is the cognitive factor, where children's cognitive immaturity causes them to believe that rules are real things like chair or gravity. So they exist outside people and they are not a product of what people's mind. So because the child is not so matured cognitively, they are still in what the pre-operational stage where they have their animism, principle of conservation, etc. So they think rules are actually concrete things, and it doesn't occur to them that it is human beings that have made these rules. So according to Piaget, children between 0 to 7 years are the pre-moral period with little understanding of what actually a rule is and the purpose that the rule even serves. And so that is why they just accept anything that parents say is right or wrong. The second type of morality is what Piaget calls the autonomous morality. The autonomous morality. And it happens in children 10 years and above. Here they understand that what rules are made as a result of social interaction. Rules are agreed on by a group of people and they can be changed if the majority of the group says that what they should change those rules. So now the child is cognitively mature to understand that look, the rules are made by human beings and they can be changed by these same human beings. So punishment should fit the crime and the punishment should be delivered by adults is not what necessarily fair. They consider the motives and intentions when evaluating whether an action is good or bad. So here it is not just because they are punished for it. That is why they say that the action is wrong. So, with the example of somebody taking meat from the pot, the intention is because the person wants to satisfy hunger, which is a basic need. And so, somebody who is 10 years and above can reason that no, fine, although stealing is wrong in the instance where the person took that meat from the pot. The motive behind is not to harm anybody or to cause harm to anyone, but is also to feel what a basic need, which is anger. So here they are questioning the motive, they are considering the intention behind the action before judging whether or not the action is right or wrong. So fairness and equality are important factors to consider when what constructing rules. So children can change rules to fit what unusual situations. So they know that stealing is wrong. But in this particular situation where Kofi is hungry and he had to go and take meat from the pot, they can bend the rules or they can shift the rules to fit the situation. So rules are decisions made by those involved and can be changed at will as long as what everyone agrees. With higher level of moral reasoning comes the ability to see rules as what changeable. They are not fixed. Once it is being made by someone, it can equally be what changed. So children at higher stages are superior to lower stages because they show greater understanding of society and that are more socially adaptive. Here, they are getting to understand the reason behind the rules that are given. And so they are able to what? Adjust their reasoning. They are not able to think of right or wrong in absolute terms. Now, let's look at one story and let's see what happens using Piaget's theory of what? Moral development. So one day, a girl named Abigail was playing with her mom, which was named Alice. Abigail decided that it would be fun to have a fufu party with her mommy and her teddy bear. So Abigail went into the kitchen and got a packet of neat fufu. Abigail carefully prepared the fufu in a steel bowl, but while she reached for water, the bowl accidentally slipped out of her hand, and the fufu fell, became dirty, and was disposed of. Another girl named Priscilla was playing with a boyfriend called George. Priscilla wanted to play marching band in kitchen by what? Ringing pot lids or pot covers together. When her boyfriend just said that he would not want to play marching because it was too loud, Priscilla became very upset. She was so angry that she grabbed a cup of the counter and threw it onto the floor, smashing it into pieces. This objective judgment gives way to subjective judgment when children enter the stage of what? Moral relativism. So in this advanced stage, children consider motives when judging actions. So in this example, for instance, which reasoning did Priscilla display and which reasoning did Abigail display? I just want you to think about it and see which of the Piaget's reasoning did each of these people fall under. Now, according to Piaget, young children who are at the stage of what? Moral realism, that is the autonomous morality stage, can judge right and wrong by the consequences of what? One action. Therefore, young children will say that Abigail is more bad because she threw the fufu away. But according to Piaget, young children who are in the stage of what? Moral relativism can judge right and wrong based on the circumstances and agreement. Therefore, young children will say Priscilla is more bad because of breaking of the cup was needless. So these are two actions, and depending on who you gave these scenarios to, if the person is in the heteronomous morality, the person will say what? Abigail is bad because she threw her fufu away. But somebody who is in what? The autonomous morality stage will say that no, Abigail's food fell on the floor and became dirty. That is why it was disposed of. It wasn't because he did anything bad. But for Priscilla, she intentionally threw the cup on the floor and it was mashed. And so Abigail is more bad because the breaking of the cup was what? Needless. Now let's look at Kohlberg's theory. Let's look at Kohlberg's theory of what? Moral development. So this theory is also a stage theory, like Erickson's theory. It's in 3 stages. Now, every child goes through this stage without skipping any of the stages. However, movement through these stages are not natural. That is, you don't automatically move from one stage to the next as you mature. But movement occurs when the person notices what? Some deficiencies, some inadequacies in the present way of coping with what? A moral dilemma. So Kohlberg says that at this point, the child has what? A dilemma between what is right and wrong. So if the child notices that no, their way of perceiving right and wrong, there's something wrong with it, quickly the child will what? Adopt a new way of thinking about what is right and what is wrong. According to Kohlberg, people cannot understand moral reasoning more than one stage ahead of their own. So, for example, a person in stage 1 understands stage 2 reasoning, but nothing beyond it. That is it. So, you move from one stage to the other and then to the other. So, these are the stages. Stage 1 is what? Level 1 is pre-conventional morality, and there are 2 stages under. Level 2, we have conventional morality. There are 2 stages under. And then stage 3, we have post-conventional morality, and there are 2 stages under. So we take each of the levels and the stages and we see what happens there. When we take level 1, which is pre-conventional morality, It happens between age 0 to what? 9 years. Now, the first stage here is obedience and punishment. It is common in young children, but some adults are also capable of what? Expressing this type of reasoning. So children see rules as fixed or absolute. Stealing is wrong, so it is wrong. So they obey rules in order to avoid punishment. So they will not steal because they don't want to be punished. It determines a sense of right and wrong by what is punished and what is not punished. So compared to what? Piaget's heteronomous morality, they are judging the right or wrong of an action based on the consequences that follow it, whether punishment or reward. So they obey superior authority and allow that authority to make rules, especially if that authority has the power to inflict pain. So if they know somebody can beat them and the person has made a rule, quickly they will obey the rule. So in response to the rules that will affect what? Their physical well-being. In stage 2, we have naively egotistical, self-interest or exchange. At this stage, children account for individual points of view and they judge action based on what that serve the individual needs. So reciprocity is possible, but only if it serves one's own interest. It is motivated by revenge, an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth. So here, they are not judging based on consequences, but if it serves a particular need. In fact, the action is wrong. Yes, we know it is wrong, but did the person take that action to serve a particular need? If it is to serve a particular need, then they say that what it is right. So if somebody hits you and you feel like, no, you have to show the person a lesson, and you also hit it, then they feel that that hitting that you hit back is not wrong because it is what? It is to defend yourself. And that is the vengeance or the eye for eye philosophy. Now, people with this type of morality are self-absorbed, far assuming that what they are generous. They believe in sharing equally what they get, regardless of the need. They believe that the end justifies the means, so they will do a favor to get a favor in return. Let's move to the second stage of what? Morality. Good girl, bad girl orientation. That is stage 3. And it falls under what? Conventional morality. At this stage of moral development, it is based on what? Living up to societal expectations and rules. What does society expect of you? They just want to conform to societal rules so that they are accepted as being a good boy or being what? A bad boy. And because they know that if they don't conform to the societal rules, then it will affect how they are perceived and their relationships with others, significant others within the society will be what? Affected. So they want to, have the approval of their peers. They want to feel like their intentions are important as deeds. And so they expect others to accept intentions or promises in place of deeds. They begin to put themselves in other people's shoes and think from their perspective. So here they just want to conform to what? Societal rules so that they are not labeled as bad girls or bad boys. The fourth stage, which is under conventional morality, is law and social order. Here, children begin to consider the society as a whole before they make a judgment. Here, it's not about conforming to societal norms, but they want to consider what? The society as a whole. They focus on maintaining law and order by following rules, one's duty, and respecting authority. So it's a duty of the doer who believes in rigid rules that should not be changed. They respect authorities and they obey it without questioning. So at this stage, it's not only about conforming to society's rules so that you are called a good boy or a good girl. They also want to what? Maintain law and order. They also want to what? Respect those in authority. They support the rights of the majority without concern for what? The minority. So about 80% of the population does not progress past what? This stage, because they believe that this is what we need to do to respect authority. This is what we need to do to maintain what? Social order. Now, when we come to post-conventional morality, which is 16 years and above, we have stage 5, which is the legalistic social contract. Legalistic social contract. Now, at this stage, people begin to account for the different values, opinions, beliefs of other people. So the rules are not important here, but what? The members of the society should agree to them. So they come to terms that people have different opinions, people have different philosophies, people have different values. So it's not about just the rule, but if the rule is there, the members of the society should agree on these rules or these standards. So it is motivated by the belief that the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. If a larger number of the society agree on the rules, then it is okay. They also believe in what? Consensus. Everybody should agree. Just that than what? Just a majority of the people agree. They believe in the respect of the rights of the minority, especially the rights of what? Humans. Then we have the last stage, which is stage 6, universal ethical principle. Kohlberg says that this stage is based upon what? Some universal principles and abstract reasoning. So at this stage, people will follow their own internalized principles of justice, even if it conflicts with the laws. Remember, I said earlier that people have their own philosophy as to what is right and wrong. So here they don't match it with what society deems right. Once they are convinced with that internalized principle of justice, even if it conflicts against the law, they go ahead and do it. So they believe that there are higher moral principles than those that the society accepts, or there are higher moral principles than societal rules and customs. And they are willing to accept what the consequences of their disobedience if they go against the societal rules. They believe that the dignity of human beings are sacred and all humans have value. So I have a narrative here which will help us to navigate the Kohlberg's theory of morality. A woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to produce. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, hence, went to everyone he knew to borrow money, but he could only get together $1,000, which is half the cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it to him at a cheaper price or let him pay later. But the druggist said no. He says, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it. So hence got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. According to Kohlberg, those who are in stage 1, they will say it is wrong to steal the drug because it is against the law. So it is bad to steal. That is what those in authority have said. So it's bad. Those in stage 2 will say that hence might think it's right to steal the drug, and the druggist will not. Since everything is relative, each person is free to pursue his or her individual interest. Somebody who is in stage 3 will say that it is okay to steal the drug, that he was a good man for wanting to save her. His intentions were good. Remember, this is where the intentions behind the actions become important. So it was really the druggist's fault for overcharging. Those who are in stage 4 will say that what They are concerned with the society as a whole. And so they will lay emphasis on obeying laws, respecting authority, and then what performing one's duty so that social order, law and order is maintained. So they say what will happen if we all started breaking the law whenever we feel we have a good reason. As a result, there will be chaos and society will not function. So they will say hence action was wrong. Somebody who is at stage 5 will say that what makes a good society? There is a social contract that we all agree to uphold until it is changed democratically, like everybody agrees that it should be changed. So hence may be defended, though on moral right to live. Then those who are in stage 6 will say a just society. It will treat the claim of all in an impartial manner, based on what basic dignity as individuals are maintained. So they will say what? Yes, it is against the law, but at that point in time, there's an interest that the person seeks, and that is what healing his wife of the condition. So these are basically the stages of what moral development. I want you to read more about this, and then I want you to discuss some of the educational implications in the classroom. How do children learn what is right or wrong? Are there times that they will defend what is wrong because they think that the reasoning behind it is good or the intention behind it is good? Write down the educational implications, and then when we come to class, we will discuss. Thank you very much and see you next week in class. Bye bye.